So I looked out and I see this bridge coming up over a river, and I'm like, I've never seen that before. And that's the moment when the captain made his infamous or famous words, this is your captain, brace for impact.
Wow.
And when you hear that, Merv, when you hear that on a plane, something's going down.
Many people want to be leaders. Fewer understand what it really means to lead people well. So what separates the two? Welcome to the Lead with Purpose podcast with your host, Merv Jersak. Each week, you'll hear honest conversations with leaders who have been in the trenches and have stories to tell. They'll share their practical wisdom to help cut through the noise and get to the heart of leadership. So let's get started.
Welcome to another week's episode of Lead with Purpose podcast. I'm your host, Merv Jersak, and you can always find me on LinkedIn, Facebook, or my website at peoplefirstprojectmanagement.com. You know by now that every week on this podcast, I interview people who are leaders in their field and who are willing to share their successes and their missteps, even, all for our benefit, of course. My guest today is Dave Sanderson. And I'll give you this much introduction. He's had almost 40 years with a corporate career, but something dramatic happened to change his life's trajectory from being a corporate employee to becoming a leadership speaker, author, and dare I say, a resilience coach. But what happened after that day may be even more powerful. So let's listen to how a longtime corporate leader transformed his crisis into his purpose. Welcome, Dave, to the Lead with Purpose podcast.
Merv, thank you for having me today. Thank you.
You bet. So I'm not going to give away your story. So I want you to feel free to take us into your story. And by the way, I don't mind if you give us a little suspenseful time along the way. How's that?
You got it. You got it. Well,
All
I
right.
appreciate the opportunity and thank you very much. Just a little bit of background, like you mentioned, I had 38 years in corporate sales management for a few different primarily technology-based companies. And, in 2009, I was the head of what's called the consumer packaged goods division in the Southeast for a company by the name of Oracle. So I was working with companies that actually made a good or distributed a good and or retailed a good. So I was doing a lot of traveling, visiting plants and distribution centers and things like that, so we could hopefully get their distribution and or manufacturing systems, financial systems, to be one of our clients. Well, in 2009, I was on one of those trips. I was going on a 3-day business trip to New York City because we were going to be working in their distribution center because we were looking at the entire, supply chain system. That's what we were basically doing those 3 days. And so, when we wanted to be there early that day to see how the whole system worked. So we got there about 5:00, which means we got done about 10 that day. The trucks are all gone. We've seen what we needed to see. And man, I get to go home early now, which, is always exciting for me because I travel so much. So it's like, very cool. I get to go home early and surprise my family. So about 10:00 that morning, I called our travel agent. She put me on to change my flight. And she changed my flight to a flight called US Airways Flight 1549, which is now known as the Miracle on the Hudson.
Yep.
I was not supposed to be on that plane. I was supposed to be on a 5:00 flight that night. But, that day was 11 degrees and snowing in New York. And that's nothing unusual about New York in the winter. So that's no big deal. And so the planes were delayed, which is no big deal, especially out of LaGuardia. So nothing out of the ordinary until about 60 seconds after we took off. And that's when things started going a little sideways. And, we all on the plane all heard this big, loud explosion. Now, I don't know if anybody's ever been on a plane where you hear an explosion, but, that's not good.
No.
But when I looked out the window, I was to see 15A on flight 1549 on January 15th. I saw 15, so I ran that day with me. And when I looked out the window, Merv, I saw smoke and fire coming underneath the wing. So I knew something had happened, but, when you fly so often, you also understand that planes have multiple engines. So all this meant to me was I'm not getting home early today. We're gonna go back to the airport, get another plane, start this whole process again. So I'm not going to get home early. But as the plane started banking, I started looking at the window and I saw things that I never had seen before up close, where the plane was actually below the skyscraper level at New York City, which caught my attention because I've never seen that angle before. I'm like, if you saw the movie Sully, which some people have, the opening scene actually shows that plane lower than the tallest building. So that's sort of what the perspective was from my viewpoint. So I knew something didn't look right. So then I looked out the window because I was like, okay, where are we at? Because I know the geography, you know, I mean, there's New York and a river and there's New Jersey. So I sort of knew the geography of that area. So I looked out and I see this bridge coming up over a river and I'm like, I've never seen that before. And that's the moment when the captain made his infamous or famous words, you know, this is your captain, brace for impact.
Wow.
And when you hear that, when you hear that on a plane, you know, something's going down.
Well,
Something's going down pretty quick.
I've got 4 million miles on my butt too, and I can tell you there are those times. So yeah, go ahead, go on.
Yeah. Yeah. So, when you hear that, it's like, I better get my stuff together. Right. And so, cause, we roughly about 60 seconds after that. Cause, one thing I tell people, I mean, I believe the captain does not get enough credit. He gets a lot of credit for a lot of things, but one thing I don't think he gets credit enough for is getting that plane over that bridge. Cause
Yes.
he was totally incapacitated. He had no power, right? He lost all thrust in all the engines. And he had to actually glide that plane and lift it over the bridge because he was, we were descending so quickly because he didn't have any power. So he actually had to figure out how to lift that plane up to get over the bridge. That's why once he got it over the bridge, and we only cleared the bridge by roughly 400 feet,
Oh,
he had to put the nose back down to get speed back up again. Right. So I tell people I don't get think he gets enough credit for that, but once he cleared the bridge, it was about 60 seconds until we crashed into the river. And I tell people that last 60 seconds when you think you're going to die, it's surreal.
mm,
I heard people making phone calls on the plane. I heard people texting, but I saw the movie of my life sort of pass before my eyes. I tell people my belief system, whether you believe it or not, my belief system is when you're going that last moment, when you're ready to sort of maybe meet your maker, you get total clarity of what your life's about and you understand what's going on. And I tell people, I think that's the moment I realized I did not spend enough time with my family. I was
wow.
so focused on the mission of making money because that's what dads do.
Yep.
I mean, that's just I grew up with a dad who grew up in the Depression. So, my dad's mission was to make money for the family. So I followed that model on the world because that was a model I grew up with. But that last moment, I realized that, I didn't spend enough time with my family. I knew that was going to be a big regret. But as I was praying, I was also putting a game plan together, Merv, because one thing I've learned, through my experiences in my life, especially my athletic experiences, you better have a game plan, whether you're in sales or sports or whatever. And if I did survive, if this, for some reason, this thing gets pulled off, right? And I
Yeah.
survived, I better have a game plan. So the whole way down, after I prayed, I kept saying in my head, aisle up, out, aisle up, out, aisle up, out. Because that way, one of the things I learned in my life from in my time of being head of security with Tony Robbins and my experiences with all the people around that world is once you say it enough in your head is ingrained in your body. So now you just react. You don't have to you don't have to wait to get down and say, okay, what am I going to do now? You already have a game plan. So that's what was my game plan. And when we hit, it was a hard hit. Yeah, the captain estimates he hit between 110 and 120 miles an hour.
Oh, wow.
And
Yep.
one thing a lot of people don't understand, Merv, I actually talked to somebody who's in maritime, does a lot of maritime work. And I told him, I said, I think you're exactly right. Cold water is one of the hardest surfaces out there.
Mm,
And if you look at the picture from a different angle, that river was really, had ice. It was iced over. So
interesting.
he hit, when he hit it was a hard hit. It was a jarring hit. So, I went back and forth in my seat a couple of times. I was like jerking myself, right? But then all of a sudden the plane stops and it gets really quiet. And you look out and you see light. But you also see something else. You see the water line. It's already halfway up your window. And water's already knee deep in the plane. So now it's like, okay, we got another problem now, right? No one thought about that one immediately. Because everybody just, we're not going to probably survive this thing. But now the story goes from the captain and the first officer doing an amazing job. And now it has to be a team. And that's where I tell people, it doesn't matter, if you're black, white, purple, orange, everybody checks your ego at the door because now you have to work together as a team.
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing how people come together when they have a common mission. And that's one of the biggest leadership lessons I like to teach is, it's amazing if you can pull how you pull 155 people together to know each other, to care about each other in less than 6 minutes and do something. And one of the big tenets around that is, people focus on a common mission. And if you've seen the movie Sully, actually the mission was actually stated in the movie Sully. It was an untold mission that day between all of us. I think everybody knew, just in our heads what the mission was, but it was actually said in the movie Sully. And I don't know if you seen the movie Sully, Merv?
I haven't, but I'm going to now. I'm going to
So
now.
there's
Yeah.
a part in the movie where a lot of people will miss it, but the mission of that day was no one dies today,
Yeah. Good.
and everybody comes together. But one of the things, when I was ready to get up, because I was aisle up out, that was my game plan. But when I got to the aisle, something changed, and I think it probably changed only direction of that day, most definitely that day, but maybe the direction of where I was going to go afterwards. And I heard my mom start talking to me in my head, and my mom passed away in 1997. But there was something she would tell me when I was a child that I just kept hearing in my head. It was, if you do the right thing, God will take care of you.
Oh, wow.
And I tell people what was great about one of the great things about my mother, there's a lot of great things about my mother. One of the great things about my mother is, and I think one of the things that I've been derelict in my job as a father is she always made her kids make decisions for themselves and have consequences. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges a lot of parents have today, including me. I mean, I'm not even anywhere perfect. I think one of the things my parents did really well is make all their kids make decisions early. So when things got tough in life, you can make a decision.
I should be writing down these leadership lessons as you speak.
Well, I think that's one of the biggest tenets of leadership is you got to be able to make a decision and go, right?
Yeah.
And so my mother taught me that lesson, but she didn't tell me to do the right thing. She said, if you do the right thing. And I just could have gone out into my game plan. But the right thing for me was I grew up in a small town outside of Cincinnati, Ohio, where everybody knew each other. And in a small town, everybody takes care of each other. It's just the way we grew up in the small town Midwest. So instead of going up and out, I climbed over the seats to go towards the back to see if anybody needed help. Now, in the back of the plane was a totally different condition. It was already submerged underwater. The water was about chest level deep. And if you saw how the plane landed, it landed backside first.
Yeah.
Those bins had popped open because of the impact, because of the power. So now you've got luggage just floating in the water, right? And you're about chest deep. So I got behind the last person and started making my way out.
So
And, it was dark.
let me stop you. So while you were
Yeah.
helping other people, were there other people sort of scrambling and climbing over each other, or did people sort of
No.
have a sense of calm and assist? Oh, wow,
The
that's
term,
amazing. That's amazing.
yeah, Merv, the term I used that night, I was interviewed on CBS with Katie Couric. And the term I used with Katie Couric was controlled chaos,
Wow. Yeah.
where it was no one got out of sorts, but it was fast, right? It was like, you got to go. It's like, there's no time to be thinking, okay, what's my 5-year plan right now?
Yeah.
I'm going to do it. No, you just got to go. So, I got behind the last person. And I want to put the proper perspective to this because you got to remember, this is late afternoon, New York City, winter. Okay. So it's about anywhere between 3:40 and 3:45, 50 at this point in time in the afternoon. It's getting dark
Mm.
and you're already submerged underwater. So it was all you basically had to sort of feel your way out. You could see light up there, right? But you sort of had to feel your way out. And the first light that I saw was on the right side of the plane at 10F. I'm like, out of here, buddy. It's time to go. I can't do anything else. And I started to get out that side door and I looked out and it was an amazing sight. There was no room on that wing or the boat for me. But people were already being rescued. And I tell people, I think part of this miracle, if not the major part of this miracle, is having someone to rescue you there just a couple minutes after a plane crash. And tell people, I think the real heroes of the day were the first responder units.
Yeah.
And the first responder was the waterway, the New York waterways, the ferries. They were there in less than 2 minutes to rescue people on both sides of the plane. So, that's why I was actually inside the plane for 7 minutes, waist deep in 36-degree water and holding on to the lifeboat because it was floating out into the river. And they kept yelling at me to hold on because they wanted to be able to get off on the wing. So there's a picture of me that was released on Good Morning America, me holding on to this lifeboat. That's how I found out that I was the last passenger out of the plane. I didn't know at that point.
Okay.
But this is where leadership starts coming in. Because one of the things a lot of people do not know, unless you really know the backstory of what happened that day, is on that impact, when the plane impacted, the flight attendant in the back piece of metal came up. It sliced her leg open.
Oh,
And so she was hurting. She was incapacitated. So she actually went out the front door on the left, the entrance door, right?
good.
So all the crew was on the left side of the plane. So the right side of the plane had to be managed by passengers like me who had no experience, had no training. You see, and part of leadership, I believe, is, you don't have to know everything, but you got to be able to give certainty to those in those uncertain times. And that's when the leaders step up. And I just wrote a blog recently about this point about, leading without permission. And I think in companies, especially in companies and in organizations and people, things like this, people who will look to you, whoever's got the most certainty in that moment. And there were CEOs on this plane. There were a lot of leaders on this plane. But the people who give the most certainty at a certain time were the leaders on that plane. So, I think that's what happened on my side. I had to manage a door, which I had no experience of doing, right? But I had to figure it out. And one of the things about leadership, Merv, you probably know, is you don't have to have all the answers. You just got to be able to make a judgment and go.
In fact,
And
I've always said, if you do have all the answers, and you think you're the smartest person in the room, you've heard this. You're in the wrong room.
You're in the wrong room. Exactly right. It's and that's why I tell people the same thing, Merv. It's because, the one things that I really talk about, and I think this is part of leadership, is you got to have enough information to be able to make the next best move.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about the move five things down the road, right? What's my next best move? And that day for everybody on that plane was that thing, was my next best move, right? The captain had to come out and he was walking up and down, checking, he was the last person off the plane. He was doing an amazing job, but his next best move is to make sure everybody was getting out, right?
Yeah.
My next best move was holding on to the lifeboat before I could get out, right? So part of leadership is, what's my next best move? And like I referenced a few minutes ago, when you're in a situation like this, you don't have time to put a 3-year, game plan together, a business plan. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to do this, and this, and on this time frame, and this is how we're going to do it. No, you don't have time for that. You got to be able to make decisions quickly. And that's part of leadership, and that's part of leading without permission.
So in this situation, and this is truly a crisis, and I think you've already kind of alluded to the fact that titles don't matter. What would you say were some of the unwritten rules that people followed that helped everyone survive at that point?
I think number one, no one got out of sorts.
Good.
I think everybody kept their heads. And I'm going to give a credit to a captain that I met who gave me that insight. And I wasn't even thinking this. This is probably 2 or 3 months after. And I was flying back from Orlando to Charlotte. And, at that point in time, I was getting, I was usually getting upgraded. I was getting a lot of things because of what happened, right? So and this was, right? So being in first class, I get to talk to the captains, and the captains wanted to talk to me, right? They wanted to find out. So long story short, I was talking to this captain. He said something to me, Merv, that jarred me on this topic. And this is sort of where I came up with this. It's like, he's exactly right. He said, if I could do the same thing that your captain did here in Florida, same thing, you get incapacitated and I get the plane down, right? And say this big lake, that big lake in the middle of Florida, right? I get it down, right? Great. Outcome is totally different. And I said, why? I don't understand. He goes, listen, he said, look around you. So I started looking around you. Merv, you ever been to Orlando?
Yep.
What kind of people fly out of Orlando?
Kids, families, Disneyland people, Disney World people.
Right.
Yeah.
And he said, what kind of people were on your plane? Who flies out of New York?
Yeah.
In the middle of the week?
Corporate.
Business people.
Yeah.
He said that had everything to do with that, the outcome. Because the passenger makeup of that plane, people can make a decision didn't get out of sorts because they have to make decisions all the time.
Well,
So I said that is amazing. I said that's an amazing insight. So one of the things I coach people on is, if you get on a plane, you better look around you. See what kind of people are on the plane, because that'll tell you sort of if something does happen, which God bless, hopefully nothing does happen.
Yeah.
You'll understand a little bit about how to go about how to lead at that point in time. Total different management style.
So, as you were telling the story, I couldn't help thinking there is a difference between panic and urgency. And if I'm a leader, I have to understand that. You said you worked for Oracle. I worked in healthcare as well for Deloitte and a couple of places like that. There's, those the urgency of the situation, and when you get those huge projects, you start to panic when the deadlines are approaching. What do you think in the case that you just talked about in that situation? What do you think was the difference between, say, panic and urgency?
Yeah, I think people understood that the plane was already filling up with water,
Yeah,
so they knew that they had to move. I think panic, there was a couple of people who unfortunately I think went into that situation just because, you know, they that's maybe the model of their world. But, when you have other people around you who are keeping their heads and have to get them what I call reframed, right? They have to
yeah,
reframe them very quickly. And I'll give you an example. So I was standing inside the plane holding onto the lifeboat, and there was this lady on the wing, and she wasn't moving. She was not moving. And I tell people I think she was in that state of shock, right?
yeah.
I mean, she just in a plane crash. Now she's standing on a wing. She doesn't know what to do, right? And she wasn't doing anything. And I tell people when you're in a situation that is urgent, like we're talking about, you got to keep moving. You got to
Yeah.
keep moving one way or another. Because what was happening was she was in the middle of the wing, and people were on the boat trying to get out on the wing, and people couldn't move, right?
Sure.
So when you have somebody in that sort of that, I wouldn't say panic, but out of sorts, maybe just I'll use a different terminology. Maybe panic is the right word. I don't know, but you got to do something radical to break them out of it. You sort of got to do something to get their attention. So I started yelling at this lady because one of the skill sets that I've learned in my life is you've probably been in business meetings like this or family situations where things are moving so fast
Yeah.
and your mind can't keep up with it all, right? I mean, it's like going so fast. So you got to do something radical to break them out of that state of shock because all of a sudden people just are stalled and they don't know what to do. So they need somebody with some more, give them certainty at that point in time. So I yelled at her. She looked at me like I was a crazy man, right? Why are you yelling at me? But what happened is I got her attention and somebody on that lifeboat grabbed her arm, and helped her get on the lifeboat.
Oh, good.
And all of a sudden I'm looking out on this wing. You can see people walking down a wing. And from my viewpoint, it looked like people walking on water.
Wow.
And I
Yeah.
think it was an amazing sight because people actually, I found, a moment in time because things were moving fast. These people may be walking on water, man, because I knew the wing was underwater, but subconsciously I didn't even look at that. I was like, wow,
Yeah.
wow. These people are
So,
walking down.
so you mentioned
So
you were that Captain Sully was the last person off, but you were the last passenger off the plane.
it's
We
correct.
talk a lot about situational leadership in business and in situations, uh, basically leading from where you are, not where you rank. What would you say
Right.
about your actions that talk about situational leadership?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. So 8 years prior to that, I was asked to do a project for an organization called Disney, and primarily Disneyland. And long story short, they were having a situation where a lot of the characters were actually getting injured because of either just excitement or mal intent. Say it that
Yeah.
way. So they asked me because I was the head of security for Tony Robbins. I had to deal with situations all the time, but I didn't have any firearms, and our team had to use situational awareness. Right, we had to figure
Yeah.
things out and use verbal and other ways to get people diverted, their mindset to move a different way. So I believe that training helped me immensely that day because one of the first things that he teaches everybody, especially his security team, was state management, how to change your moment, state management immediately, and get people refocused and reframed. And there's three ways to do it: through your physiology, your internal dialogue, and or your focus. Those are three ways you do it. So I believe all that training that I had, all those situations, it led me to that moment. And that's why I called my second book Moments Matter, because I believe that everybody has these moments in our life. They're there for a reason and a purpose. And they may not serve you back in 1979, right? They may not
Yeah.
serve you then, but all of a sudden, that one moment, right? But you had to do something in 1979 that nothing 30 years later comes. And you got to use that moment.
Yeah.
And I point out a moment in 1970. Yeah, something happened to me in 1970, 71 that I had to call upon to be able to serve that day. And it's like, I start thinking about it. A moment I didn't think about it, right? But as I started reflecting on what happened, I'm like, was that the moment in 1971 when I was in Boy Scouts, I had to do something that was going to serve me at that moment? And it did. And
Interesting.
it was the skill set of being able to swim,
Yeah. Huh.
right? Where
Yeah.
there's a lot of people who don't know how to swim, right?
And and when you and then if the water's 36 degrees, you have to be able to keep your wits
Yeah.
about you when you're in that
You have
cold
to,
water.
and you're
Yeah.
fully clothed, right?
Yeah.
You've been
Yeah.
in the water for over 7 minutes, 36-degree water, and it's rough water. It's not like it's not clean water, FYI. I've swum in it a few times with the Navy SEALs. But yeah, so I tell people, you know, these moments in your life, don't take it for granted. Something happens, you may have a negative situation that happens in your life, and we all do. Heck, it's
Yeah.
called life, right? No one gets through life everything's unscathed. Even the Queen of England had her moments, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's like those moments are there to be able to serve you at a later time.
Well, and even as you were saying that moment of Boy Scouts, I was also thinking about how often do we get on an airplane and the flight attendants do their thing, and people are reading, they're talking, they're
Don't pay
not paying
attention.
attention. My
Don't
goodness.
pay attention.
And I've
I
flown enough like you, that I do pay attention. I do look to see where the
Yep.
exits are, but a lot of people, they don't, and I'm thinking if that ever happened, people would not be prepared, and so,
Yeah.
that's another lesson we can take from what you're talking about here is pay attention to those in charge.
Exactly right. I've had people removed from the exit row because they weren't qualified. And I know
Yeah,
people got angry because they wanted the leg room, and I get it. And I like the leg room likewise.
yeah,
But if you're not qualified, you're not paying attention, and something happens. I mean, there's no room for error, right? I mean, you have no room for error. You have to execute.
yeah.
And that's the thing about it. I'm glad you mentioned that because it's I look around. I had a situation last year happen. I was flying from Dallas to Albuquerque, and about 20 minutes into the flight, all of a sudden, flight attendants are starting to lock things down. Things are moving really quick, and I noticed this pattern. I was like, I've seen this one before,
Mm,
right? And what I found out later, he was actually turning because he said told everybody to brace. To get everybody get ready to brace. And as soon as I heard brace, I'm like, this thing's going down.
not again, right?
And well, yeah, because his engines were on fire. He didn't lose them; they were on fire. So he was banking to go back to Dallas Fort Worth. So I told the people around me, I said, you better get your phone out, put it in your pocket, put it in your pants, and stay aware. And the one guy's like, look at me, he's like watching his TV on his phone. I'm like, dude, pay attention. Something's happening, right? And when we got back to Dallas, they had the fire trucks there, the EMTs there,
Yeah.
right? It was a very rough landing. So I tell people, you better stay aware. You better know what's going on, and if you don't, things can go sideways pretty quick.
So did you make it to Albuquerque that day?
No, we never did.
Oh,
We went back, and I got back, and they were going to rebook me to Albuquerque, and I was going to get there too late for the meeting. I'm like, just send me home. I want to go
yeah.
home now.
Well,
I just put me in first class, send me home, so I don't have to think. Right.
yeah.
So they
Well,
were very accommodating to me that day.
that's too bad because I live in Albuquerque. I could have met your plane.
It was well, they were going to send me someplace else, and it's like, no, I don't want to drive 3 hours from somewhere in northern
Yeah.
or southern Colorado or whatever. So
So let me
but no,
let me just turn this conversation a little bit.
okay,
Because that experience, and I'm so glad we had this conversation. That is tense. That is something else that hopefully none of us who are listening today will have to go through that.
right.
But now take us a little bit behind the curtain because you started speaking while you were still in corporate, but you wanted to take this leadership lesson into kind of a leadership consulting, that sort of thing. So take us behind the scenes and how did you actually start speaking and what did that mean to you from leaving your corporate job and going on, I'll say going on your own?
Well, thank you for asking because I was never my initial intent.
Yeah.
But what I tell people, what really happened was the day after the Miracle on the Hudson, when I got back to Charlotte. I mean, I was in sweats. I lost everything. So this American Red Cross, who I love dearly, gave me some sweats to wear. I had sweats and no underwear. They gave me some about 12, big old shoes to wear. And I went by my office here in Charlotte just to let them know that I survived because no one called me or my wife. So I didn't even know they knew
Wow.
that I was in a plane crash. And the first thing my manager said is, you going to Michigan next week, right? First thing out of his mouth. Not like, are you okay? Can we help you? And so Merv, I knew at that moment, I said yes,
Hmm.
but I knew at that moment that I had to get out. I said, I'm just a number here. I'm just a number here. But how do you get out? You got those gold handcuffs.
Yeah.
You're making a lot of money. You got benefits. You got a wife. You got 4 kids that need to go to college, right? All these things, right? How do you do it? So, I was asked to speak. I guess my real big reason I started speaking is because I spoke at the American Red Cross, fundraising luncheon here in Charlotte that year, and I helped raise $120,000 that day. And someone noticed that I did that, so I got invited to the national, event in Washington D.C. with the American Red Cross, and helped them raise over $6 million at that event.
Wow. Good.
So I knew I had a mission. I knew, but you still got to figure out a way to get out of it. And so I talk about what I learned that day, Merv. This is when I think I talk about leadership lessons. Is I believe everybody in this world, there's 4 freedoms everybody's going for: freedom of time, money, mission, and relationships. And I believe a lot of people are disgruntled at their work because they're not meeting one of those 4 freedoms.
Yeah.
Right? They have freedom of money. They may be making a lot of money. They may like the relationships, but they may not have the time to be able to dedicate, or they have time, but they don't believe in the mission. So what I realized is I didn't have any of that. I didn't have
Mm.
any freedom. So I had to figure out, so how do you get out? So I figured out a strategy on how to start getting my own freedom back. But it took me 3 years to figure the strategy out. This is what I teach in my leader when I consult and coach people. I teach how do you do that? How do you break free to be able to have total freedom in your life, and so you can have a fulfilled life? So
Yeah.
but it took me 3 years to figure that game plan out. Speaking was my first avenue, very candid.
Oh, good.
It was my first avenue to start realizing that there is another way to do this.
Yeah.
And being able to, worked with another organization or another gentleman who taught me this. I'll give him all the credit, but I teach it's called the VCR strategy, and it's called Vision, Capabilities, and Reach strategy. And I realize that everybody's looking. They have a vision for what they want, and or they have a capability to be able to do it, and or they have a reach. They be able to get it out. But
Yeah.
very few people have all 3.
Right. Yep.
So if I can help somebody with one of those 3 things, I can add value to them. And that's how I started making the move out. I started using that strategy of how do I give people freedom using this strategy called VCR. And I started putting tools together to be able to help people do that. And that's how it started working out.
No, that's a great thing, and even for my audience who has no intent of getting out of corporate, I
Yep.
think one of the lessons that you just, I don't know if you meant to do this, but I know when I wrote my book, a lot of we're talking about relationship. I wove that all the way through. When I do my leadership consulting and speaking, it's all about relationship. And so, when your boss said, "When are you going to go to the next thing," without even referencing the trauma you just went through,
Yeah.
that's a relationship destroyer as opposed to a relationship builder. So yeah,
Well, that's the reason. That was my strongest one.
yeah,
Is I felt that I wasn't even respected in my own company. And I was a top producer that year.
yeah,
And so it's like, if I'm not respected by my company, there's a lot of people there I like. So
yeah,
over the last several years, I'm going to start reframing that. There's people at that company who didn't respect me, not the company. The company, I feel Oracle's a great company.
yeah.
I just think they had some people there that were out for their own best interest only, and didn't care about their people. And this, and being a part of leadership strategy and consulting, you got to care about your people.
You do.
And when I
Absolutely.
was with Colin Powell one day in an elevator, he taught me that lesson very, very up close and personal. And it stuck with me since, I think it was 1999 when I had that experience, and it stuck with me to this day. At
Great.
that point of, one thing I talk about is, people value people.
Yeah. Well, man, this has been exciting. This has been incredible. I like to wind down these podcasts with some rapid fire Q&A where give you a quick question, you give me a quick answer. How's that? Can we do that?
Let's rock it. Let's go.
All right. So if I was to ask you, let's see, what was one word that describes a great leader in a crisis?
I would say resilience.
Resilience. I love that. Yeah.
Resilience, the mindset of resiliency that we're going to get through this thing, right?
Yeah. What was the best decision you made, do you think, on flight 15? Was it 1549?
1549.
Without overthinking that decision, what was the best one?
I think the best decision that I made was staying inside the door and leading, because I had no experience. So I think someone had to take that on.
Yeah.
And I just took it on, and I think that was the best decision I made because, yeah, I'm sure we all made mistakes. All of us made mistakes.
Yeah.
But we did the best we could in the moment,
Oh, sure.
and it turned into a miracle.
Well, and I've also heard you a couple times you talked about doing the right thing. I think you got that lesson from your mom.
My mother, yeah.
What's the hardest part of living that lesson?
Yeah, I think there's so many things pulling at all of us all the time, and whether it's money or some fame or whatever it is. And, I just believe that, my mother said that. I think my mother did everything she could to do the right thing by all of her family all the times. But it was something that in a discussion I had with Tony Robbins, probably about 3 or 4 weeks after this happened, and I had a 3-hour conversation with him, and it was amazing to
Wow.
get 3 hours of his time. And he wanted to sort of teach me and give me expectation of what's going on.
Yep.
Well, one of the first things he told me, and I've lived by this to this day, and maybe he knew something about me, but I didn't know about myself before. But he said, stay humble, have
Yeah.
humility, right?
Yeah.
He said that's going to serve you more than anything else. Is stay humble the entire time. It's not about you, and he's exactly right. It wasn't about me. So I think having humility and having gratitude also helped in that world.
Well, in your case, you also put a whole bunch of people first, so that's incredible. My tagline is people first.
Yep.
So you fed right into that. Thank you. Here, let me ask you one more.
Sure.
What's one question you ask yourself before you say yes to any opportunity?
Will this add value to them, and more as important now, value to us? Because one of the things I really had a struggle with, Merv, is I would say yes to everything. Because I
Uh,
wanted to serve. That was my one, but I realized that didn't have enough boundaries around myself, and that's why, now I've got to really be focused on, I wanna add value to you, but this also gonna add value to our mission likewise.
sure.
So that's one of the hardest things. That's why I try not to get in the middle of those kind of discussions, but unfortunately, they still come.
And that's a great response, even if you're in the boardroom with your team. That's just a great response.
Yeah.
So, Dave, thank you very much. This has been a very powerful conversation. I think what stands out to me is not just what happened on the Hudson, because, now I am going to go see the movie Sully. So it's not just what happened on the Hudson, but how intentionally you carried out those lessons forward, I think now into your new career, into your service, and into your calling as a leader. And so I respect you highly for that. So,
Well, thank
um,
you.
let me give you an opportunity to tell my audience where to find you to either book you for speaking or consulting or perhaps just to connect.
Well, thank you very much. I tell people the best way is LinkedIn. I put new content out every day on LinkedIn. Just, I get my random thoughts and I'll start writing. So LinkedIn is the best way. I think it's David Sanderson on LinkedIn. I think is what I'm under. But yeah,
Well,
go to my website, davesandersonspeaks.com. That's probably the best way because that way you can sort of see some of the things we're doing. We're actually rebranding in 1 week from now on 1/1. Where our new organization is called Resilient Partners Group LLC, where we really want to focus on the bigger picture than speaking. It's really around how do other people build resiliency in their life, not only in their business but their life. So that's a new direction we're going to be taking in 2026.
very good. Well, again, my guest today has been Dave Sanderson, who to me is the epitome of a leader who has shown us what leadership looks like without title in a situation, what it really means to truly do the right thing when it matters most. So, Dave, your journey, I think, to me anyway, reminds us that leadership isn't about waiting for that defining moment. It's about being prepared when it arrives and then choosing how to live differently afterwards. So I appreciate that. Thank you for sharing not only a remarkable story, but the practical wisdom behind moving from corporate success to a purpose-driven impact. And I appreciate that very much.
Thank you very much.
Until next time.
If today's conversation added value, make sure you subscribe. And if this episode resonated, please leave a quick review to help other leaders discover the show. And remember, leadership works best when you put people first. Let's lead with purpose, together.